Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Before I get into this video, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like or comment on my video and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, moving forward to the next part of the PvP situation which I've been describing is where do you advance from once you've already started taking on players who can fight back a bit. Now, taking on a pure PvP situation where it's PvP versus PvP is a very complicated situation when it comes to PvP, and it is the highest level of PvP combat. Now, the first thing to note when you are fighting another PvP player is you can't really fight it with the simplest of strategies because another PvP player will use the same thing that you are going to use. He's going to attempt to duck and dive, he's going to attempt to dodge, he's going to attempt to fire back, and he's also going to attempt to disrupt you and warp stabilize and run away. Everything that you do he's going to do. So PvP versus PvP is actually a combat situation where you're actually jumping in with fleets. So when you are fleeted up, there is no jumping away option because the strength of your fleet is your numbers, and you always want to hold on to the numbers for as long as possible. The only time you actually jump is when your shield or your armor is way too low and you have no other choice but to run before your ship is totally destroyed. Now, this is the format of playing the highest level PvP. That is for the true hardcore pure blood PvP players. You will go into example a gate camp like Genesis Federation's Astoria, Paragon, Soul. You are going to push into those areas. That means that you know they're going to attack you via a camp to protect the territory, but you are going into the camp to fight. Now, why would you go into a gate camp? Number one, it is the only place where you're going to get PvP players ready for pure PvP. Finding them anywhere else, you're not going to get the pure PvP in the sense. So you are going to jump into one of these gate camps, which is basically where you need to be. And once you get into the gate camp, you are now going to open fire with your weapons. Now, what weapons do you use in that situation, right? Now, using a long range weapon is good against PvE and mining vessels because of the range aspect and the fact that you can close in and run away if you ever need to. But when it comes to the gate camp situation, close range weapons are generally going to be very, very useful. That's because most gate camps occur within an area of something like 25 kilometers. So anything that can fire in 25 kilometers, heavy and hard hitting, is going to be a fantastic weapon to use. Now, the other thing is you have to know that ships are going to get into that 15-kilometer radius to use Weber fires against you. So those ships are your number one and biggest priority to destroy. Anything that webs you means that it increases the damage you take. And bigger gate camps means harder fights. And your fleet has to be big enough to take on each gate camp. So let's say that you're running into a territory and you want to figure out what you need to equip to take them on. Number one, see what type of ships are plastered or placed at the gate. Now, when you do this here, you're going to run with the pod or with a very cheap frigate like a Condor 2. If they are attacking you with frigates, then you can run in a cyclone and simply wipe it out in no time. You don't even need a very big fleet, maybe two cyclones, and you'll be able to take down the entire fleet. But let's say they aren't running frigates, and instead of frigates, they were running cruisers, standard cruisers. Once more, you can run in with your cyclone. One cyclone can really take on an entire fleet of cruisers, but two or three will definitely make the fight a lot easier, and it will reduce the chances of you losing a ship from your formation. And let's say that it was actually battle cruisers forming up on that entire gate for that camp. That means you need to match the number of battle cruisers to win. Or if it was faction cruisers, you need to match the number of faction cruisers with battleships or faction cruisers yourself. And that is the only way to go through. But if you are facing something like a phantasm wall, I would suggest not trying to attack it. Even if you're a hardcore PvP player, it takes about 3 fleets to destroy a shield wall if it's just one ship destroying it. If not destroying it, putting it up. If it's more than one ship putting it up, it takes multiple fleets. It takes upwards of 60 to 80 players to break that shield wall. And it has been tested for me. And you know what? my test may not be completely conclusive that you can destroy the ship, but it does show that you can damage the ship's shields and bring it down very quickly with the strategy. So that's all that I have confirmed from the PvP strategy for taking on shield walls. But there is also a catch. If you are going to take on shield wall formations, you need multiple fleets to come with you. And you have to remember that you also need to have a shield wall in your formation to be able to play the shield wall formation. And you also have to keep range and everything in consideration because you can't drift too close to the enemy players because then you don't do damage, and all of this plays a massive part because of the fact that you need to do damage to one ship to take it all down. Now, moving forward in the hardcore PvP arena, what are the setups and build makeups that you're going to run? Well, it's going to be your recommended settings, recommended fittings. Most ships have a set of recommended fittings that tell you whether they play well in PvP. If they put a disruptor in it, that means it's fantastic for PvP. If they don't put a disruptor in it, that means it's not really a PvP ship. But most ships will have the disruptor recommended, and that is how you're going to play in that particular role. Now, the recommended fittings and my best builds are very similar in most of the aspects when it comes to the ships. However, the difference between the recommended builds and my best builds was the fact that I was considering research at the time. And right now, when it comes to research, it doesn't make a difference because you can simply respec all your skills. You can take every skill that you have in missiles and change it into lasers in less than a day, and that is just your bonus and your benefit. You don't have to really worry too much about it. It's something that you can play or something that you can ignore if you wish to. Now, moving on in the whole aspect of PvP, let's talk about the actual combat. Now, when it comes to combat, you have three strategies to work when working with your full fleet. You can have your fleet commander lock onto your primary target. Now, this is how it will work in breaking up your fleet for this assault. Let's say that you're not running with formations in terms of a wall in front, support, defense, debuff. You're not running that. Everybody's just running one style play. That is the medium attack. So attack style, the general assault strategy. What you are going to run against your opponents in this format is you are going to try and blast on one opponent. So your commander is going to lock onto your primary target and you're all going to fire on him. Now, when I say you're all going to fire, everybody except for three players in the entire fleet. Now, the reason for this is every fleet will have what you call a supporting role, and this is where you are playing it. Now, what you do is you go and you target the weakest ship from the lot. If they're all the exact same ship, you'll just target on one and you'll just keep firing. Everybody goes, there's no breaking apart. But let's say that it was two battle cruisers, four cruisers, and the rest were all frigates. One was a faction frigate. The three of you will jump straight to the faction frigate, warp disrupt it, and start assaulting it. Now, when it comes to faction frigates, one battle cruiser can do 50% of the damage to its shield, and three of you will mean the shield will go down plus half the armor will be gone in that one assault that you all are going to launch. Now, the reason for this is you need to be able to take care of the secondary targets while the primary target is being destroyed. And the fleet commander isn't going to be able to paint the entire fleet and telling you where to attack. That's how come the three of you who are in this role will choose your own targets. And one of you will have the role of deputy, and you basically will paint the target as well. So primary, then secondary, then you will go on to your tertiary target. Now the tertiary target is painted after the secondary target is painted. So this one is painted while the first target is still being destroyed. At this point, it's basically taking care of priorities within the fleet. The reason why you're taking out a faction frigate is faction frigates can hold quite a bit of damage in comparison to a cruiser. And that is something you want to get rid of because they do pack in quite a big punch. And if you can get rid of the enemy's baseline assault, you can actually get rid of the entire fleet from a camp. And it will change the battle to your favor. Now, this is strategic play. If you are thinking that I'm talking nonsense because you don't need to take out faction frigates pack quite a big punch. They can do about 20% damage to a battle cruiser, and a battle cruiser is a really tough ship in comparison to many of the other ships. Considering that it's 20% and a faction cruiser can do that, They can also take out up to 33 to between 33 and 50% of a cruiser's armor with a hit. Now that's depending on fittings and setup of the ship. So think about it, they really are deadly and you need to take them out. Generally, you're going to play with the highest level ship you can afford. So if you can go faction, you'll go faction. If you can go battle cruiser, you'll go battle cruiser. And respecking skills to play PvP is also a wise idea. Remember, electronic warfare plays a massive part in your combat as a PvP player. If you reduce the cost of the power usage there, it means you can last longer in terms of armor regen. And all of this plays an important part because it allows you to defeat opponents. Now, when you are fighting like this and you have these massive numbers on one, the next thing you should be thinking about is who do you stop when it comes to warping away? Well, here's how you're going to choose your targets. Primary is going to be warp disrupted by at least 3 players. So you already will assign it out of the 7 players who are going to attack with the on the primary target. They are going to warp disrupt the primary. The secondary target is warp disrupted by the fleet who are taking on the secondary target. 3 ships means it's -6 in terms of warp disruption. If they are running double warp stabs on their ship, they still don't have the advantage in that fight because they had to sacrifice either more armor or more attack in order to do this here. If they are doing that, it means they already lost the fight. They have to get out of there instead of taking you on in combat. Now, the remaining 4 will actually jam the secondary target after your first and secondary target, so your tertiary target. They're actually going to jam the tertiary target or your secondary target for the primary fleet. Now, when they have jammed the secondary target or the tertiary target, as I would call it, this means that your next set of assaults is already set up. And as you go through your combat and that first ship is destroyed, the second ship is destroyed, you will keep following this format. And you will keep swapping around who's warp disrupting which ship. And once the commander, and you can see that the entire fleet has moved to the second target or the third target, you keep swapping over to a new target for disruption. The whole idea is to not allow the fleet a chance to get away from the combat. And the last person or the last player that you're fighting generally gets warp disrupted by everybody, so a -20 scrambler strength is what they're going to face off against. And generally, you're going to take out anybody in those low figures very quickly. So once you have this part of your combat down, this is the best way to play PvP. Now, where are other places where you're going to meet massive PvP combat in a similar arena? There is going to be dead spaces. Now, dead spaces are an anomaly that are very, very heavily farmed, and the fleets that go in are both PvP and PvE. PvE fleets have the advantage against the dead space itself. PvP fleets have the advantage against players who jump into the encounter to take it on. Now, running in with big ships into the dead space is a good idea to take out the enemies quickly and to survive a little bit longer so that you can actually inflict damage on the other ships. But when other players enter in and when conflicts happen within a dead space, it's all about who has the advantage in terms of gameplay. Whoever has enough disruption and enough firepower wins the fight. So if you are running with 10 cyclones or 10 hurricanes into a dead space, you can actually take out just about anything that comes in. If a faction cruiser has to jump in, everybody is just going to warp disrupt it, webify it, and destroy it. And that is the general way in which you defeat them. Cinnables and Gilas aren't really that strong when it comes to facing off against big fleets. However, something like a Phantasm is fantastic against taking on the fleet because it has a massive amount of resistance from its armor field that it can generate. And with that high resistance means it can take on very big ships. I'd say that with the massive resistance, it's equal to 3 ships in combat. That means when it goes down for 10 seconds, you actually can do quite a bit of damage. However, about 3 of your ships will go down in combat if you fight it in a prolonged battle. Now, you have to webify it, you have to disrupt it. That means that you have to get very close to the ship in order to do massive amounts of damage. And when you webify it while you're fighting in the close range, you're already within the field of the shield. And that is going to be the big problem. However, when you take it on when the field is down, that is the perfect time for you to attack. And you attack as hard as possible for as long as you possibly can. Because if that ship goes down in that period with enough firepower, like say for example, you strip away all of the shield and half the armor, you know that your next run against it is going to be the end. However, the damage that you're taking to your ships is going to be proportional, and you're going to have to be running a warp stabilizer to escape it. And you're not necessarily going to be planning that type of assault with that type of a fleet. You're going to be planning to last longer in a fight. So that's about the breakup that I have for hardcore PvP. I actually really love hardcore PvP like that there. Those are some of the most interesting fights and the most complex battles. And simple ships can change the format of that fight. Example, throwing in a Moa Guardian into your Cyclone fleet, or sending in a single ship outside of the fleet to give you a shield wall, or a single ship outside of your fleet to um, give you logistic support or something like that there. All of this makes a massive difference in your combat styles, because with these little additions you can do something like picking up the loot while you're destroying ships, because you know that the combat isn't favoring you completely and that you're going to lose ships as well. Things like this here are played in order to get the advantage, and sometimes the best way to beat a hardcore play field is to take out the small ships first, because they're only using the small ships to gain numbers and keep your shield from regenerating completely. So once you have taken out those small ships, they no longer have the advantage of being able to actually destroy you. Now, this series on PvP has only had about a 50% script, so a lot of my talk is actually from personal play. Now, in most games that I play, um, Ark of War, Star Trek Fleet Command, online games such as okay, I did play Eve Online, and when I played on Eve Online, I was a massive pirate. I think I did like 15 or 20 kills an hour. That was generally the way I went. And when I played on other games like Total Domination and so forth, it's like about 6 7 weeks of non-stop defense that I could put up, and about 10 one hit one win scenarios that I used to play. I'd say that I was ranked in the top. Actually, no, I was ranked in the top 10 of the server originally. I was almost in the top 9, but at that point, a lot of the pay to win players started to expand very fast, and I dropped down to about the 80th on the server. In terms of other games, I've held weekly best PvP, I've held monthly best PvP, I've been the best PvP player for a year. Things like that, they are things that I've managed to play in hardcore PvP. And those are the things that I want to achieve in this game as well. I want to reach that level where I can sit with the best PvP player for the week in terms of the game, doing maybe about 600 700 kills of a single ship. And those are possibilities, but it takes time to become a good player in PvP. And I didn't say that there as a method of disparaging people against playing PvP, but this is the reality behind it. In order to reach the top 10, it took me something like 8 months, and everybody else who rushed in to try and be in the top 10 fell from the top 10 very quickly, because your being able to stay in that rank is based on how well you can play. So basically, for a week or two, they manage to stay at top 10 and then they fall. And that is the whole problem with playing PvP too early in a game. When you play it before you're ready, you just end up losing too much of combat styles. So for everybody who is starting right now in PvP, I suggest you stick to playing the low sec areas instead of jumping into null sec, because null sec has heavy combat. And at current, there's quite a few botters who are also running those gate camps. So they play very unfair. They lock you without you even uncloaking. They warp disrupt you, jam you. They take away your feed on aspects of the game so that you can't see for 10 20 seconds. It's all strategies used by these players in the nullsec, because they don't think that you're going to report them for botting. But we did catch a player. He actually has a live feed up in terms of a blog showing how easy it is to use his bot. And we did report him in terms of his bad conduct. And that is something that players have to do, because he's literally bragging about using a bot in the game. And if he's using a bot and getting 700 kills, he's not really a top PvP player. He is basically a big time cheater, and that's why he's getting such heavy kills. Because he's literally taken on PvP fleets with his 10-man frigate fleet basically, and nobody can actually beat him. And it doesn't make any sense because I know that one of the teams who went through managed to take out 10 faction frigates on their own and managed to take on a fight with 6 high end faction cruisers. For them to have been destroyed by one man's fleet of frigates doesn't make sense because they have fair power and they can match. And they were jumping gate to gate. In other words, they want an autopilot, they want AFK. So their defeat was a massive thing for us to figure out. And we were wondering what they did wrong in combat. We actually had a major discussion for like about 4 or 5 days on how it actually played out and what you can do to beat that type of a camp. And at the end of it, a few days ago, someone told us that no, this guy here has a blog up. And I went and I called them personally on Discord and I tried to speak to them about it because they were really upset. They didn't know where they went wrong. They thought they were playing PvP correctly and they needed to figure out where they had to improve in order to fight. And when they found out what happened, the first thing they did was they went straight on the report bar within our support and they reported immediately that this player was botting. They even included the link to his blog showing that he's botting on that gate camp. And that is one of the ways in which you can tackle this game. You can show that we stand together as a community and we don't allow such things to happen. So thank you all for watching, and I hope that you're all going to go out and start your PvP adventures because PvP is part of this game in a major way. Even if you are a miner, you're going to start getting into PvP eventually, and I hope that you all enjoy it. Thank you.